we're moving. Are we moving? Can you see us? Hello.
Hey, remember, if you come at the king, you best not miss.
Well, that's the theme, of course, for today, which is November 5th, the anniversary. What does that make it? Because the gunpowder plot, when Guy Fawkes was the one arrested in the face of the gunpowder plot to blow up the House of Lords, and November 5th, 1605.
Yeah, 400 years.
Is it 400? 400 and something, obviously, because we're not in 2005 or 2015, right? Or 2025. It's hard to remember what year we are when, you're busy. When you're busy Bitcoining.
Yeah, approximately 400 years ago, the Guy Fawkes conspiracy, trying to blow up the House of Commons, and basis for a great film called V for Vendetta.
Right. And, of course, a great poem by John Milton, which started, remember the 5th of November, gunpowder, treason, and plot. If you can't give us one, we'll take two, the better for us and the worse for you. They started that, it was a national holiday in England from the following year. So 1606, it was a national holiday. And then by the late 1600s, during all that conflict between Protestants and Catholics, it became, they were getting really wild, let's say, burning various Pope effigies and Catholic characters on the bonfire at night. And some of them, the nights across England and the towns across England became very violent, I guess. So they had to kind of back away from allowing bonfires and stuff like that. And the first ever Guy Fawkes bonfire night that I ever celebrated was in Lewis, down near Brighton. And it's, if you look at the Wikipedia on Guy Fawkes Day and bonfire night, it is something that you see that that was one of the locations that was most vicious and violent during their celebrations in the 1600s and 1700s.
Yeah, totally. Well, here we are. We're made it through another 5th of November, and it's exciting stuff. I guess Bitcoin is the peaceful answer to this.
Bitcoin is the peaceful answer, of course. Yeah. First of all, smash the like button for our new backdrop. And I made this work. As soon as we did that failed microdose the other day, well, it wasn't failed because it was actually great content. If you listen back to it, it was amazing. It was, Max was totally on fire. Go listen back to it. But, the software failed because there was an update to that new Monterey, the new operating system that apparently was happening in the middle of us live streaming. So that caused chaos. But we're here, we're back with you, and we have a new backdrop. I'm hoping that you like it because I'm preparing for all live Orange Pill, right? We're not going to do any pre-records and stuff like that. We're going to start having live, cut to guest joining us now. We're going to try next Tuesday. In fact, Nick Bhatia is going to join us. But in terms of today, remember the 5th of November, and from the Alan Moore comic, V for Vendetta, is that, if you go after the king, you best not miss. And that was obviously the lesson of the gunpowder plot because they missed. They didn't kill King James I, as they had hoped. And all the lords and aristocrats there, they failed. So, but they came close. But close isn't good enough, right? When you're going after the king. And this is, we've had 3 kings now in terms of layer 1 money. We've had gold, and then we had U.S. treasuries, and now we have Bitcoin. And it just the genius of, we've talked about this often of the we called it evolution, but now you could also look at it as the art of war. It's like the game theory built into the protocol was the master genius of Satoshi, that he understood that if you go after the king, you best not miss. So the only way to do that is to sneak up on it, right? You can't just go straight up as a little baby and say, hey, I'm only $2 million worth of Bitcoin, but we're going to take on the US Treasury market. Like, it had to hide. And I think, you know, now we know that Bitcoin is the king, and the other two are just the has-beens, the post-alpha, you know, king person, head of money, head of the world.
Right. Well, we knew that the fiat money wouldn't survive because none of them ever have.
No.
You know, maybe one, but they've lost 99% of their purchasing power. I think the big surprise for people is that gold is now in the crosshairs of Bitcoin. And more every day, money managers are coming out and saying, you know what, people are actually buying Bitcoin instead of gold, or they're selling gold to buy Bitcoin. Remember when Digital Currency Group over there in New York with Barry Silbert launched that ad campaign, dump your gold and buy Bitcoin? And that was maybe 3 years ago now. The gold community was outraged. Like, this is so crazy. No one's going to sell their gold to buy Bitcoin. And yet, it's exactly what's going on right now. So the king is emerging Bitcoin, and it's even replacing gold. And it's happening actually right now.
Yeah. And, you know, Adam Smith was right talking about how the economy, and therefore also money, is it must reflect nature. Like, nature has it perfectly. So if you look at, you know, what do you call a flock or a herd of lions and stuff like that?
A pride.
A pride. Well, yeah, the female is with its pride. The female lioness is with its pride. But there's no, like, there aren't like a bunch of dude kings hanging out, right? There's just one huge mane, and he controls everything, and that's his pride. And they don't share territory. There's clear boundaries to their territory.
Yeah.
And the same thing with money. Like, I used to believe, like, some of the arguments that there would be many monies, right? And they could all compete. There could be many currencies, but there can only be one money at a time, I think.
Well, and politically speaking, people think that there are different political systems. And one major school proposes private property, and the other major school proposes community property, yes. Right? And we talk about socialism / communism versus capitalism / Austrian economics. And so this debate's been going on for a while. Friedrich Hayek, of course, in the Austrian school, said, to your point, that the only time we'll ever have good money that's separate from the state is if it sneaks up, it sneaks into existence, and the state is tricked. I think he actually uses the word tricked into not believing that it exists. And it seemed at the time to be a fantasy and an impossibility. Like, how could you sneak good money into the system and the state not notice? And yet Bitcoin did exactly that, to your point. So going forward, though, to say that, okay, Bitcoin is going to be the only money because only one can be the money. There's only one king. That's true. But it also looks like there's only going to be one political system. It's going to be based on private property. So the problem with socialism and communism and all these other types of community-oriented economic models is that they're going to be de-energized, right? Because as Bitcoin, hyper-Bitcoinization takes over, two things happen. And we see this already in Venezuela. Venezuela's energy use is going up, and its carbon footprint is going down. And that seemed even 6 months ago to be an oxymoron because everyone was saying, oh my God, Bitcoin's boiling the oceans. No. Bitcoin will take more than half of the energy of the world. It's a 51% attack on the global energy supply. But carbon footprint's going to drop 50, 60, 70% because Bitcoin will use things like volcano energy, geothermal energy, renewable energy. Plus, It will defund. It'll defund the Pentagon. It'll defund the war machine. It'll defund communism, socialism, all the bureaucrats that are required to impose a top-down socialist political system. They'll be defunded. Many of them will just switch camps and become Bitcoiners. The ones that want to stick around, they'll just wither away and be defunded. So it's not only the rise of one money, but the rise of one economic system. And the closest one, I guess, out there right now would be Austrian economics. So that looks like that's going to be the big winner.
Yeah. And, they got waylaid by gold, and gold really failed. Well, basically, gold failed since Bretton Woods and a bit earlier. I mean, the fact that U.S. Treasuries kind of snuck up on gold, like the system didn't realize it for a while. Even the fact that Treasuries ever existed, that system, that the U.S. was able to build this huge empire based on Treasuries, it showed you that gold was weak. From that moment, it showed you that gold was actually weak, and it would not survive. And now you see, at the end of this dollar regime, you see the likes of JP Morgan, which is obviously, since the first days of the U.S. Treasury, U.S. dollar fiat system, very powerful, most powerful bank in America. And you see, Jamie Dimon and Max Kaiser have been dueling each other through headlines for, at least since 2012 about Bitcoin. And now they come out, JP Morgan says Bitcoin is acting more like digital gold. Okay, they're conceding Max is right when he told them a decade ago. And that is acting like digital gold now more than ever, and predicts $146,000. But again, basically as soon as Bitcoin ever was convertible, by the time it hit $1,000, it was all over for the dollar, really. Because if it hits 146,000, as even JP Morgan's conceding, it's going to hit 1.46 million. And then beyond, there will be no Bitcoin conversion rate available for US dollar holders one day.
Right. Hyper Bitcoinization. Everything's priced in Bitcoin. It's unit of account. But another point is that for 10 years, up until maybe last year, so I should say for 8 years, a lot of people said, well, what if governments banned Bitcoin?
Yeah.
And about 3 or 4 years ago, I came out and I said, look, the more likely outcome is that governments will embrace Bitcoin, and then they'll start competing with each other to see who has the most Bitcoin. It'll become game theory will find its way to the sovereign level. Hash wars, global hash wars is something I coined at the time. That was the first, I think, person to actually coin that phrase. And so now, like in Florida, for example, you had the mayor of Miami said, I'm going to be paid in Bitcoin. And then now the mayor of Fort Lauderdale is saying, no, I want to be paid in Bitcoin. Now the mayor of New York saying, no, I want to be paid in Bitcoin. So this idea that Bitcoin is going to be banned by the government is false, completely false. And what I said is going to happen is exactly what's happening. The game theory is kicking in. People are competitively, as Michael Saylor has said recently, he who has the most Bitcoin wins, right? So this is a mad scramble, to just get more Bitcoin. That means a couple of things. At the same time, because of the halvings that happen every 4 years, the supply coming out of the mining industry is constantly shrinking, and the total supply is finite. So, the demand is going exponential, and the supply is shrinking. So, we know very simply what happens to price. Price goes up. So that's the number go up technology built into the protocol. And that's true. So once we're at that point now. So there's very little. I mean, Paul Krugman, who's the New York Times, who's another one like Peter Schiff, or another one or Jamie Dimon, for 8 years, he's been saying this is garbage. When Paul Krugman first bashed Bitcoin, it was around 200 or less. Now that the mayor of New York has said, I'm going to start buying Bitcoin, he wrote something on Twitter saying like, oy vey, now we're all doomed. Right? No, you're doomed. You're doomed.
Yeah. Yeah. You're doomed. And the thing is, like, that's again reflecting nature. The same thing happens in nature. The king, the alpha male is sitting up there. There are other males, they're beta, they're out at the edge of the territory looking in. And the king doesn't mind, right? There, he's kind of looking at, keeping an eye and saying, the hubris of him. He's like, yeah, right. I've seen 100 of you come around trying to take my family, trying to take my land, and it's not going to happen. And then it eventually happens. The same thing happened with Jamie Dimon. He thought like past history meant that just because the U.S. dollar and Treasury and the Federal Reserve had been supreme since the early 1900s, that it would continue that way for the next 100 years. So, and he was king of that. He was the top of the pyramid of this fiat pyramid scheme.
Right. So what protects Bitcoin from being disintermediated by a, quote, new Bitcoin? And the answer to that is you can only discover absolute scarcity once. And that's what happened when the Bitcoin protocol was dropped on January 3rd, 2009. And so that's what gives it protection from a rear guard attack. So you've got infinite upside, and you've got nothing, no competition, and nothing from in the back attacking you. So that's a vector for gains, permanent capital gains, permanent upward movement in your asset price for 100 years or more.
If there was going to be competition, if there was like, hey, you know, aren't you open to innovation and competition, and like one of these 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 other coins that were, you know, created out of thin air since Bitcoin, you know, one of those might displace it. And it's like, well, you know, we have thousands of years of human history, most of it, you know, of the written part of history, and us using money and contracts from thousands of years ago. We know exactly how many layer one monies there have been. And if it was just a matter of innovation and technology and advancements in technology, we would have had examples of tens of thousands by now. But there's only 3, including Bitcoin.
All right. I'll tell you another sector that's interesting. So we talked about the political sector.
Yeah.
And we talked about the banking sector. Yep. And how Bitcoin's beating both of them. The third major sector that Bitcoin is embattled with would be the technology sector, would be Silicon Valley. You know, Silicon Valley hates Bitcoin just like the bankers hate Bitcoin, and just like the political class hates Bitcoin.
Yes.
Because Bitcoin puts a lot of them out of business as well, the VCs and others. And remember, most of the shit coins that have come around since Bitcoin are VC-sponsored coins. And there's a certain model that they've worked very well. Jason Calacanis, for example, is a VC. He's a Bitcoin basher because it makes his model look like it's been disintermediated. It looks like he's out of date and he's no longer relevant. So he's fighting back, and other VCs are fighting back, like a Mark Cuban is fighting back, others who are consider themselves in the technology space, and they really, really don't like how Bitcoin is making them look less interesting than Bitcoin. You know, they tend to be ego-centric, egomaniacal. Certainly the leaders of Facebook and Google and Apple are very, you know, have very healthy egos, and they don't like this king. You know, they don't like being relegated to beta class. So they are fighting back. So they're willing to take, if you look at what happened to Squid Coin last week, it was a $1 trillion rug pull, but there's a lesson to be learned there. Anything that's not Bitcoin, and you could look at any of the top 5, 6, 7 coins, is subject to the same type of catastrophic 100% rug pull at any moment. So you should be aware of that. Right.
And the other thing that with the Jason Calacanis, and I saw him doing some sort of thing with a Chamath, whoever that guy is, you know, that billionaire guy. They have all these VC coins and that bags and stuff like that. They had a little live stream where they were laughing about their bags and how much they've dumped, and Solana, I guess it's called, or something. And then, you know, the thing is, like, these cantillionaires, think of that Bastiat quote about, like, when plunder becomes a way of life of the people at top, they build up a legal system and a moral system that justifies it. So cantillionaires have built up an entire ideological and moral structure around that justifies why they uniquely have all the free money, that they get to be the money first, that they're this huge proof of stake in this fiat system, and that they justify it through their moral arguments that they're some sort of wealth creator and blah, blah, blah. So that's why they deserve it. Whereas, Bitcoin doesn't care. Bitcoin doesn't give a fuck about them. And
right. Let's talk about Cantillon effect and Cantillionaires for a second. So people say, oh my gosh, where did all this inflation come from? Why is food prices up now toward record highs? Why are we about to take food prices now to all-time record highs beyond the 2008 and 2011 record high? Why are used car prices higher than new car prices? What's going on with the inflation front? Okay, if you've been listening and watching us for 10, 15, 20 years, you know that this is the Cantillon effect. So when all the money printing that came out in 2008 to bail out the bankers, when all the money printing came out all along the way with quantitative easing, with all these stimulus programs, and it drove stock market and bond market higher, and it drove asset prices higher, we would always say this is the Cantillon effect, because the money is first given to the plutocrats, who then put it into assets, use it as collateral to buy more assets, and it becomes a self-feeding virtuous cycle that develops into people now in America having 100, 200, 300 billion, $400 billion worth. That's a direct result of the 200 billion, 200 trillion, et cetera, money that's been printed. And within a few years, you would see it trickle down to the person who's not in the asset buying game, and that would be the average wage earner. They would notice it in higher prices for energy and food and basic consumer goods. And that's the problem with this monetarist school of thinking, is that it's not equally distributed at the head of the program. And so by the time it gets to everybody in the society, you have this incredible wealth and income skew. And this is exactly what we said was going to happen 10 years ago. When the Fed was doing this, we said, hey, within 10 years, you're going to have a big inflation bump on the outside. So the supply chain, the COVID, all these other causes that they're saying are transitory, that are impacting inflation, those are symptoms of the money printing. They're just symptoms. AOC was out saying these are transitory, one-time events, and there's an underlying cause, and that cause is the Cantillon effect. And now and I also said that as the inflation kicks in, the explanations from pundits and economists would get more and more ludicrous. People are equating climate change to inflation, or they're equating, whatever. So just very, very strange, non-sequitorial things. And it's going to get much crazier.
Yeah, they said if people get the vaccine, the inflation numbers will go down.
Right. So, like I said, the pretzel logic and the incredible arcane psychotic type of rationalizations for inflation, right? So they're saying, get the vaccine and inflation will go down. Like, okay, that's the insanity that I told you was coming, and now it's here. But it's going to get a lot worse, because you got economies like Australia and a few others now where interest rates are creeping higher. Okay, the Bank of England left rates at zero, ECB left rates at zero, the United States left rates at zero. Those are the three big ones. They have not yet raised rates, but on the periphery, the rates are going up. It first started in Russia, now Australia. So the tide of a global bond market collapse is coalescing. The three majors are still, holding out hope that the more money they print, they will someday figure out how to increase GDP enough to generate the taxes to pay down the debt. That's been the mantra now for 50, 60, 70 years. It's never, ever, 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 ever happened. And now we're getting ready for the bond apocalypse, which is inching its way to the wolf is at the door. It's more than just a wolf. It's a whole freaking zoo of wolves. It's a mountainside of wolves. It's every freaking wolf out there is coming to you in the form of higher prices.
And one thing, so when the king of money was gold, and we had, individuals, tribes, villages, communities around the world, hunter-gatherers, early farmers, early civilizations, people had it was very decentralized, right? Everybody had their nuggets of gold, and that's how they transported their wealth and, traded and used also slates to tell how much everybody owed the other person, sort of thing. And then you started the uniformity of it that came around the Lydia coin and then up to the florin, and vast wealth started to be built and huge civilizations and powerful city-states, with Florence being the kind of pinnacle of that, of the powerful city-state. And then all the gold got confiscated and seized, right? Upon which then nation states kind of erupted. And so the nation state spends a lot of money guarding the gold, holding the gold, invading other nations and taking their gold, like as recently as Libya, for example. And so now, like with the story you were just telling of the mayor of Miami, the mayor of Fort Lauderdale, the mayor of New York, these are city states again, right? So you're seeing this, what the new king money, Bitcoin, seems to be altering the mindset of individuals, like shaking out this sort of command and control, just a very capricious, nasty king. We now have a king money called Bitcoin, which is distributed, decentralized, peer-to-peer. It's global. It's, impenetrable, indomitable, and uncontrollable. So
right, like another thing I said maybe 7 years ago was that Bitcoin is the apex predator. So as the apex predator out there on the savannah competing with other animals for dominance, when you have the mayor of Miami and these other places now with the Bitcoin on their balance sheets, they are starting to think about, hey, maybe I should run for president of the United States. And that's where the presidential election is going to become impacted. I think there's one coming up in 2024. So that's another, 2.5, 3 years away. And if you get somebody running for president on the Bitcoin ticket, it's going to change the outcome of that election. It may, in fact, put somebody in the White House.
However, the president is the president of the United States and the fiat dollar and an old sort of analog fiat crusty system. I can't see any real Bitcoiner like wanting to have that sort of power, wanting to, bomb as the military industrial complex demands. But, I do see the rise of powerful citadels, city states that will prevent the center, prevent the cantillionaires who lust for the power over everybody else, who lust for your information, the $600, any $600 purchases over the year, cumulative over the year. They want to know everything about you because they're fragile, they're insecure, they need all this information. Honey Badger don't care, Bitcoin don't care because it doesn't need to know to micromanage your lifestyle.
Right. Well, one thought that's come up in the last few weeks would be from Michael Saylor, who says, look, going forward, the US dollar will be world reserve currency and Bitcoin will be the world reserve asset. Okay. I just don't follow that thinking. To your point, you have Bitcoin emerging with these citadels, and these citadels challenge the nation state. The nation state is dead as the dodo. And the U.S. dollar is clearly a legacy of a nation state, and and nobody wants the dollar, and the global use of dollar is going down. I don't understand that. I must be missing something. I
think it's, there's no one single day, there's no one single hour or minute or time or place where this all happened. But looking back, you can see history always becomes so clear from afar, right? Like you could see that there's some sort of disintegration at that the command and control center that happened with the states. The states in our whole lifetimes, when Max and I were growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you never had states just outright, not since the pre-Civil War days, like challenge the central authority and central power, where we have this war on drugs. And then you had these states just decide, okay, so marijuana is legal federally, but we're going to allow it here in our state. Like, that was challenging one of the prime organizing principles of our federal government.
Okay, so let's say the state of Texas or the state of Florida decides to make Bitcoin legal tender and starts to move away from the U.S. dollar. Okay, that's perfectly in the vector of what we might see happen. How does that benefit the U.S. dollar? I don't understand that.
No, it won't. And but you're seeing the city states start first, so they're going, they're going smaller, and then it'll go up to the states. I think on that sort of level. And it's interesting because it's not like the cities were the first to say, "Hey, we're going to legalize marijuana here in Miami, where there is illegal federally and state-wise, but we're going to make it legal here."
Right. Well, the last two times the United States has experienced hyperinflationary collapse, which is different than the 1930s, which was a deflationary collapse. So the two hyperinflationary collapses were the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. So during the Revolutionary War, the U.S. issued the Continental, and they inflated it to zero. During the Civil War, they issued the greenback, and they inflated that to zero from the North. So here we have a situation where some states could secede, become Bitcoin-centric, and it's the equivalent of a civil war. And I believe that would end up with the same outcome, and that is the U.S. dollar would be inflated away to zero.
You kind of referenced this in your opening. You come at the king, you best not miss. Well, Jefferies Group, which manages $440 billion worth of assets, they sold their gold in order to buy more Bitcoin. So I think I saw that they had allocated, prior to this, 5% of their assets to Bitcoin. And
if I were in the gold business, let's say Frank Giustra, who's in the gold business, debated Michael Saylor on Danielle Cambone's show, I would be really vocal about how the gold price is being manipulated. And also Peter Schiff, who's a gold bug. And the whole gold industry, for almost all of them, never mention the fact that gold price discovery is dead. They like to believe that there's no such gold price manipulation going on. If they were more vocal and saying, look, the price discovery in gold is dead, gold is being manipulated, and silver is being manipulated, we need to fight to get honest price discovery in precious metals, they would see, they might have a chance in this fight. But even the gold bugs aren't fighting for their guy, gold. They're not even fighting. They're just laying down. Bitcoin comes into the arena to fight gold, and the gold lays down on the canvas and goes to sleep. Nobody's fighting for gold.
Yeah, but also, as Michael Saylor pointed out in that debate with Frank Giustra, is that the gold miners have, these are the guys that are most anti-gold and have been participating in suppression schemes, whereas Bitcoin miners, look at them, all of them are hoarding their gold, their Bitcoin. They're hodling, they're not selling, they're selling as little as possible. And that's the two different mentalities, because of course you would dump your gold, right? Like, they know better than anybody that the king is dead, and the king is wearing no clothes. The emperor is wearing no clothes, and they're
dead and naked.
Dead.
That sounds bad.
Naked and dead. The king is naked and dead.
Lying in a ditch. Right. The gold mining industry is also equally culpable in the failure for price discovery to happen in the gold business. And again, that was articulated in that Frank Giustra, Michael Saylor debate. And it's something that has plagued the gold industry for years. They are actively shorting gold as a gold miner for years. American Barrick was one of the biggest culprits in all this. They sometimes take their shorts off, and they feel like they've got this. They're afraid that they don't want to take the risk of owning gold, and so they put these huge shorts on to try to mitigate their risk. And as a result, the price effectively goes nowhere. It's underperforming cash. Gold is underperforming cash in the lowest interest rate environment in history. I mean, even at negative rates, gold is practically underperforming a negative rate bond. I mean, gold in the last 10 years, I think, is actually down. It's actually negative at this point. It might be up maybe 1/3% or something, or 1%. So the industry's default, and nobody's fighting for gold, and the people that are in the gold mining industry are actively working against gold. So how is that going to compete with Bitcoin? You're saying, here's Mike Tyson with Bitcoin in this corner. In this corner is a 98-pound weakling with both arms tied behind their back, who's just been drugged and is on the canvas sleeping. Okay, who's going to win that fight?
However, in gold's defense, I will say it did help the new king emerge. Okay, because we were around in 2008 when the white paper was published, October 31st, 2008, 2009, when Bitcoin was first mined. It was a baby. It was an infant. It was the baby king, right? And at that time, gold was soaring. Gold was first went through $1,000 in 2008 for the first time, and it was reacting to the collapse around them of the financial system, the same thing that Bitcoin in its Genesis blog said, Chancellor on brink of second bailouts for banks. That was when gold was shining. So the central bankers, the governments, because gold was doing that, they were too busy looking at gold and trying to keep it from signaling to the people, to the markets, to consumers to stop doing what they're doing or change their mindset or to lose faith in the US dollar. So
gold was a stalking horse for Bitcoin.
Gold, whether intentionally or not, it did distract at an important moment in Bitcoin's, in its birth, when it's just a fragile infant baby, when it could have been, crushed by the king.
Sure.
And look at history. That's what kings always do. Like as soon as their cousin or their brother, their exiled brother gives birth to a baby, the wife gives birth to the baby. Well, what do? They try to, they send out, their mercenaries to go find that little baby and kill it before it becomes, even a teenager, before it develops any sort of following amongst other aristocrats and barons and stuff like that.
Right. So that was gold's last hurrah.
That was gold's last hurrah.
Gold's last stand.
But it did help, I think. It did help at that very important moment for Bitcoin.
Yep. Now it's in the nursing home. It's in the old age home. And Peter Schiff comes around to visit old gold in the nursing home, and they haven't pulled the plugs on it yet completely.
And he dances with his bar gold.
He's got his little gold cufflinks, and he feeds gold some applesauce or something, and puts the oxygen tank on, and they chat for however they can, and that's the end of gold. Gold really is on its way out.
Good riddance. You had a good run, You did well for a few thousand years. Now it's Bitcoin's turn for the next 5,000
Right, the Cambrian
years.
period, came around after 1 billion years of evolutionary stagnation. And then suddenly, boom, Cambrian period hit, and it was like life. I was just reading, they think it has to do with suddenly the amount of oxygen in the ocean spiked higher. So anyway, here you have gold was around for 3,000, 4,000 years, and then evolutionary speaking, money hadn't done anything for 3, 4, 5,000 years, 10,000 years. And okay, Bitcoin is like the Cambrian period, comes along, and suddenly, boom, the whole thing is completely different.
Right. And you know what? I do want to say, and I'm not just, I guess I'm biased, but this is beyond bias, and that Max Kaiser has written something so mind-blowing that you're just not going to believe it until you read it, and you've got to pick it up and you've got to hold it and you've got to touch it and you've got to feel it. And that is Bitcoin Magazine. It's coming out. It's dropping very soon. You have to go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com and you can subscribe to it there, but you'll want that actual physical thing to hold in your hand. It's better than scratch and sniff,
The original Bitcoin magazine, which I have copies of it because I was also in edition
number 2.
Edition number 2. My name's on the cover of that. Those are trading, for lots and lots of money for collectors as collector's item. So the republished physical version of Bitcoin magazine, I'd say get a copy and subscribe. I think you can only really get the copy through subscription, and they're definitely going to be collector's items. So this will be goes into the category of Bitcoin art. And yeah, I got a great piece in there, and it's going to be worth subscribing to.
Worth subscribing to. And then we can't say what's coming up the following quarter edition, but it is like your mind is gonna be blown. I guarantee you. And it's only something like $50 for the year. It's 4 copies, and you get this collector's edition and amazing art. You know?
Yeah.
So yeah, go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. I recommend it. You know, I was researching this gunpowder plot to kill King James I, because remember the 5th of November, it's today. And there's lots of interesting stuff you could find online, right? Because it talks about how, you know, John Milton, I guess in like 1640s, or like a few decades after the gunpowder plot, wrote the poem. But then the Guy Fawkes character eventually developed into a character, a famous, character beyond his real person, as we see with V for Vendetta. Like he's a character that became just like throughout history, like interpreted in so many different ways. But he became the star of many, what they used to call in the United Kingdom during the Victorian era. I found this, penny dreadfuls. Do you know what these are?
No.
They were cheap, popular serial literature produced during the 19th century in the United Kingdom. The pejorative term is roughly interchangeable with penny horrible, penny awful, and penny blood. So is targeted towards working class men. And I'm assuming that penny dreadful, penny horrible, penny awful, and penny blood were used by the aristocrats, right, to talk about these penny dreadful novels that these poor people were using. So it was only becoming, at that time, like more and more working class people were able to read, and you had the first of the very first railway lines. So you started to have even a distribution of these common stories, these new stories around the United Kingdom. So they became very popular. But even these penny dreadfuls, which another fascinating little bit here, is they came out of things called crime broadsides. So, the United Kingdom London loved their public executions. So when you attended a public execution, there would be crime broadsides, which were commonly sold at public executions in the United Kingdom in the 18th and 19th centuries. These were often produced by printers who specialized in them. They were typically illustrated by a crude picture of the crime, a portrait of the criminal, or a generic woodcut of a hanging taking place. And there would be a written account of the crime and of the trial, and often the criminal's confession of guilt. A doggerel verse warning others to not follow the executed person's example to avoid the fate was another common feature. So, I guess you could put Bitcoin Magazine into this. It's like a crime broadside, the crimes of fiat. It's like we're reporting on the crimes of high time preference and a fiat world and pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes.
Yep, and everyone gets decapitalized instead of decapitulated. No, everyone becomes decapitalized instead of
Capitated?
decapitated. Exactly. And that's the difference.
Right. Well, I just thought I love those words. I love learning new words. Like
Penny Dreadful. This sounds like definitely a good name for a band.
Penny Dreadful, Penny Awful, Penny Blood. I'm sure it's still used in the United Kingdom because those sort of, that class structure, they keep those, Penny Lane's not in there.
Penny Lane.
I know you have to stop as soon as you sing enough bars because then the algorithm police
two
come
notes,
at you.
Not even a full bar.
Then we'll have to pay like Sean Lennon some money for singing.
Yeah, you have to send Sean $5 for singing those 2 notes.
Right. So anyway, that was an aside. So I'm going to look at your comments again and tell me what you think of this background. It's all up for grabs. We're just like experimenting. It took me a while to, we were doing this for a year, these live streams on this software, Ecamm Live. And I finally thought, I thought like knowledge would spontaneously arrive and I would figure out how to put in like background images and stuff like that. And it didn't like spontaneously hit me. So I went to YouTube and I looked it up of how to put a background in. And it was really, really incredibly easy actually. So I was like, wow, I can't believe I waited a year just sitting passively waiting for some knowledge to like spontaneously combust into my brain and translate into me taking action. Instead, I had to take action to take further action.
Yeah. Take action. Act first. Think second. Think or swim.
Oh, yeah. No, you were supposed to tell me, okay, pony up barefoot. He or she says they love it. I think the background is groovy, babe. Says escape the matrix. I love the clock. Got one myself.
Yeah.
R says hello. Oh, you know what I realized? Hello was the first word I ever learned to write.
No kidding.
It was the first word, and I remember it so clearly. I can remember I had chalk, and I would write it everywhere on the sidewalk, on the pavement. I would write it all over the place. And I do remember my mom once, because apparently I wrote hello in my dresser drawers. And she was like, Stacy, who did this? And I was like, I have no idea who wrote hello in my drawer. It wasn't me. But I was so fascinated by that word hello, and I wrote it everywhere.
Right.
I couldn't stop myself.
Yeah. Then the second word you learned how to write was bitch. Hello, bitch.
No, that's bye, bitch.
Bye, bitch.
That's one of my favorite GIFs. I think I have like a pile of about 10 GIFs that I really like.
Oh, yeah. They're infectious. Those GIFs.
What'd they give you?
A GIF. I got some GIFs earlier. And they're fighting the GIF virus. And so they've injected me with a syringe full of GIFs.
What is the address to order Bitcoin magazine? Deadhead83 says, so Deadhead, put down the bong, put away the dope.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm going to say it one more time. Deadhead.
Yeah.
83. Store, and we spell that STORE dot Bitcoin magazine, one word, .com. Go there, subscribe to Bitcoin magazine. I promise you, you're going to love it. It'll be a collector's item. You know what? Get it. That's all. The queen has ordered it.
Well, there
The
you go.
queen, a queen throughout history, they tend to, I think it's more anti-fragile, right? Because the king is like this, you got to fight, like people come at the king, they try to kill the king, decapitate the king. And, the queen has often been able to just like marry another king, get another king to kill that king and become the queen of over there and stuff like that.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I think it's a little bit more like you have more tools at your
What about
disposal.
Boudica? Was she a queen?
She was not I guess she was a queen of, she was like a leader of, they were more tribes then, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it
She was like a queen of a tribe.
yeah. Boudica.
She was a good fighter.
Yes, she was.
She was excellent with a sword, from what I understand. She killed a lot of cucks.
Yeah, I think there's like a Stacy Boudica, right? Like.
Oh yeah. Well, there's a Stacy Buddha, which is a very serene figure out in the garden next to the gnome. Then there's Stacy Boudica, which is the warrior side. That's,
Any more
in
tickets?
the kitchen next to the stove.
Blake Harrison wants to know if there are any more tickets for your show in El Salvador. Well, there's very stiff competition for. It's sold out twice so far, and we may be able to release about 5 more tickets, but there's already like a waiting list of like 50 people.
Yeah, they can put your name on the waiting list.
Put your name on the waiting list. Go to the waiting list, and maybe Paco can provide a link. Yeah, Paco's already in there, like saying join the wait list. So that's what you got to do to go do that. We need a Kaiser episode per day. What a week. Oh no, we've had one. Okay. He's not saying he needs it. So Boudica. Okay. So Max, by the way, hit 400,000 followers on Twitter yesterday. None of them bought. Not one of them bought. No, there's all sorts of influencer marketing people and teams that will pump up your numbers, and you can buy some on Fiverr and stuff like that.
It's been a rough road. There was 10 months a couple of years ago when I was banned from Twitter. Bitter Twitter.
Bitter is a good.
Yeah.
But yeah, you were banned until about last year this time.
Yeah. So it was 10 months I was banned. So that was, I started my other Twitter account at Real Max Kaiser. But so yeah. And then of course you get people stop following during the Trump years. That was a difficult period, because you're tweeting about Trump and what's happening in Trump. And of course, at that time I was saying the Russiagate's a hoax. And now we find out officially, conclusively, without equivocation, that yes, it was a hoax and that Hillary paid for the Steele dossier, and it was a big. But anyway, all that political stuff got me a lot of people to unfollow me. I lost a lot of friends, including Alec Baldwin, who had been a friend for 35 years.
You'd have to be out there supporting him right now.
Right. So fortunately, I haven't been around him, so I didn't get shot and killed. But I lost him. I lost a lot of people, friends, that I knew from New York, who were lovies and blue party people. So yeah. But as it turns out, I was right again. That's the problem with being right and being a visionary and being a prophet, is that it doesn't really, or a journalist, let's call it. Journalism is a hard job, because to do it well, it means you don't really have a lot of friends, because people like to hold on to their half beliefs and illusions, and if you're constantly writing stuff that punctures the illusions, friends are like, I'm tired of this bullshit. I want to live in my dream world. Bitcoin's been something that when we started covering it in 2011 and we're saying, hey, this is everything that we've been saying it's going to do for 10 years. A lot of gold bugs that were our friends stopped being our friends. We used to interview Peter Schiff a lot, and I kept telling him about Bitcoin. And now he
blocks
he
us.
blocked me on Twitter because he just couldn't take the truth anymore. It became overwhelming.
Yeah, he blocked me. At least I'm not like Max on Twitter. I didn't say anything about Peter Schiff.
Right.
He just blocked me. Same with Jim Rickards. How many freaking books did we sell for him by pushing his book internationally? It's a good book, and I still say it's a good book. But
Chris Whalen.
But Chris Whalen, he blocked me too. I never tweeted anything bad about them, but they just blocked me. It was like
by association, guilt by association.
Yeah, but because we were talking about Bitcoin, and they didn't want to see Bitcoin anymore in their timeline.
Right.
Which, okay, fair enough, but you didn't need to block me. But I guess I was my tweets were so popular and they got retweeted into their stream, so they just had to block it. I mean, I block some people like Hillary Clinton. I have her blocked because I don't want to see any news about her.
Right, not at all. I have her blocked too.
So just so I don't get anything retweeted into my timeline about her, and I blocked her. But
I blocked Joe Biden, AOC, Hillary Clinton. I block all those people because I just don't want to see that garbage in my timeline.
Yeah, muting doesn't work because it just mutes tweets from them, but you still get a whole bunch of news about them. So if you block them, then you don't even see any.
And Hillary's never tweeted that she was upset that I blocked her.
No.
So I don't mind blocking her, but usually I don't block anybody who's in let's say not a former president or presidential candidate. Anyone below that, I don't. I just mute.
Yeah.
Really, because it's less. But I understand there's something called a soft block now, which is kind of new. So you block someone and then you immediately unblock them, and they will be effectively blocked, but they won't know that they're blocked. So that's the soft block, and that's new on Twitter, I think, in the last few months.
Right. So, let me check your comments here, and make sure to smash that like button and smash buy, of course. I don't need to tell you that anymore, but you should definitely go to swanbitcoin.com/orange pill, smash buy. It's all Bitcoin outfit, except for they're running some sort of promo where you could actually dump your ETH shitcoin and convert it into the hardest money ever. You could go with the pretender out there at the edge of the money, power grid, the pretender that is not the king. And if you want to, but if you want to stop playing around with second rate, you can dump your ETH and convert it into Bitcoin over at swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. And they're also sponsoring our journey to El Salvador. We are so excited for that. And I'm happy to report so far the forecast is looking for sunshine, mid 80s in Fahrenheit, and it gets down to mid to lower 60s at night. So that's kind of cool. I'll need this. I wasn't planning on bringing anything as heavy as this, but I will, because it's going to be a little bit fwa at night. And I am so looking. What's the cocktail? Margarita is obviously in Mexico. Like, do they have a sort of Caprina? Do they have their own cocktail? Do they have their own cocktail in El Salvador? Is it just hot cocoa and pupusas?
That's all I've heard so far. I haven't heard any El Salvadorian cocktails recipes.
Maybe in the comments. We'll have to tweet at Nayib Bukele and ask him what their national cocktail is.
Yeah. Let's get to the important stuff.
I think it's super important. Florida in January. Yeah, we'll be in. I think so. We're definitely going to be warm places. We're going to be seeking the sunshine as we head to the moon. You can't get to the moon without passing the sun.
Is that a fact? It seems
in my world, I need to be in the sun.
Cosmological faux pas there.
No, like that's you're thinking too literal. I'm talking metaphorical, philosophical, ideological. I need to be warm. I need to feel good. I need to be relentlessly optimistic. And I'm not relentlessly optimistic when I'm hiding under the duvet and I'm shivering and I'm cold and I have the heat blasting up and it's drying out my skin. It's making my hair frizzy and staticky and it's just making me feel yuck, right? I don't like that. That doesn't make me relentlessly optimistic. It makes me feel like a New York schmuck who's complaining about everything. I don't want to be that person.
I'm with you on that. As a matter of fact, I will literally be with you on this journey to the sun as we prepare to head south.
Right. Any final questions? Otherwise, that's it for this episode. And, on Tuesday, we're going to start doing weekday sort of live streams. So Tuesdays and Fridays, we're going to aim for. Tuesday, the plan is, unless something goes horribly wrong with my technical capabilities in terms of managing to introduce a live element to this, which is Nick Bhatia talking about Layer 1 money. We're going to talk to him about the latest happening with Bitcoin as Layer 1 money, and he's going to be on Tuesday. I think it's 1 p.m. Eastern time. He's going to join us. Well, this is a good question. Thousandaire Radio wants to know, why are you so cool?
Who is that directed at?
I'm assuming us, because we're the ones live streaming here and they're in the live chat. It's not like they're talking to somebody else, or maybe, I don't know. Kids these days have 70 screens open and multiple screens, and they're chatting all over the place. Maybe he accidentally posted it here and he didn't mean to ask us boomer sorts.
I guess because we've never had been, let's say, incorporated or gobbled up by the machine of the average type machine, the corporations and stuff. I had a stockbroker job when I was 22, and I started on Wall Street for 8 years. And then, so I got to age 30, and then I really haven't had a structured job since then, because I went into semi-retirement when I was 30. So I've been able to just basically hang out.
On my first job, I was 16. I worked 2 jobs. Orange Julius, making sugary orange drinks, which I never once drank them. They were so horrible. And I worked in air traffic control at a small airport in Connecticut, Waterford, Connecticut. And I just thought everybody had jobs like this. It was actually kind of scary, because I felt like it was a little bit too much I felt like the armorer girl on this set of Rust. It was like, I felt like I really wasn't qualified to be fueling up these planes, these small planes. I'd have to climb up on the wing and put some fuel in there. And I was like trying to look inside the hole to see if I filled it up enough. And then, they would call in for, to see if they were clear to land. And I was like, well, nobody's called in the last half hour, so I think so. Like, just land.
Yeah, it looks good. Come on down. We're having a party.
And then I would have to go up with that guy, Charlie, his nickname was Red. And because he had red hair. And he was teaching people how to fly. And it was kind of scary because, like, you have to go up there with a guy who doesn't really know how to fly. And they would be landing. I was sitting in the back, and they were landing like this. And you're like, can't this dude see that, like, we're coming in like this, and we're only, like, 20 feet from the ground?
Oh, yeah.
But when I was, like, 16, so you don't have as much fear then. It's like, oh, dude, this is going to hurt. Like, we're going to fucking crash. And, it didn't really dawn on me that if we did, like, it might have... That guy, Red, the instructor, did die with a student eventually. Yeah. But so I guess I came this close.
Poor Red.
Yeah, exactly.
It is like the set of that movie Rust. So you had a guy doesn't really qualified. He's flying airplanes, and he killed himself and a student.
No, he was very qualified. His student was the one that crashed the plane.
Right.
But you have to go up. It's like it was a little Cessna. But, this is how you have to learn to fly. You can only use the computer for the computers, back in the 80s, it wasn't like there were like advanced computers where you could do this. You just had to do it. And the instructor, they did have it was a special Cessna where they could also take control of the plane.
Yes.
From they had their own wheel and stuff like that. So, I don't know, but that was my first experience. But now looking back on it, I think that was a really bizarre first job.
Very
experience.
formative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like, I've always been flying by the seat of my pants. It's just been.
That must be it. Yeah. Just up there in the atmosphere, flying.
Anti-fragile. It was like scary. I remember now, like I could see myself sitting in the back going like, this sucks. Cause it was a student, it was like their first time up in air. And it was like, they weren't very good at keeping everything stable.
Up in the air.
Yeah, they were like.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's right.
I was like.
So when you've survived that,
I survived that, and that's how I'm able to handle this. Like even when the technology fails me or I fail technology, something goes wrong and we freeze and we have to, when you're up in the air, live on air, same thing. You can't just like say, oh, that's it. You gotta improvise. You gotta figure a way to survive. Keep the live stream going.
Chuck Yeager of podcasters.
Chuck Yeager of podcasters, man. That's me.
That's it. Definitely.
Right. I need a drink now. So it's because it's 5:00.
Somewhere.
It's 6:20 in the UK. So or maybe it's 5:20 in the UK. So we're still there's a week difference between us, right? I think they set their clocks back.
They don't. Yeah, the clocks are set different in Europe.
So tomorrow night, set your clocks back. Remember that this is a public service announcement from Stacy Herbert about setting your clocks back.
Yeah. What are we still doing in the Northern Hemisphere? Yeah.
We're heading out. But thank you so much. Smash the like button, subscribe, do all that stuff. People say that all the time. But, subscribe, hit notifications, do all that stuff because I don't know why.
Yeah, that's a good reason. It's good enough.
We're still you see how it takes me a long time to even put a new background on, but the thing is eventually we will migrate to Rumble if I could find a way to bring all of those our subscribers there, just because if things get to be anti-fragile, you need to keep live streaming, you need to keep on air, just like you have to keep in air. You got to make sure you're always being able to broadcast.
Oh, I love it. That's a great mantra. Great note to say goodbye on. Well, goodbye, everybody. And